3 million, mostly poor people, have traded their iris data, their personal kind of fingerprint from the eye, for Sam Altman's WorldCoin cryptocurrency. Which means that we might have crossed a tipping point on this project, and I'm not really sure what's on the other side of this tipping point. Could it be the utopian world where ultra-smart super intelligence of the future goes out, creates vast quantities of wealth, and it actually distributes that evenly to all of the people in the world? Or if it leads to a privacy nightmare, one in which Sam Altman himself, the WorldCoin Foundation, and a small handful of investors might get so much wealth from the project they could become the richest people in the world, as well as maybe even having an unprecedented hold on our data, our identity, our freedom, and our economy. So in this video, I'm going to explore a bunch of questions that I've always wanted to find the time to deep dive into, and I finally have. Like, what really is Sam Altman's vision for WorldCoin? You hardly ever hear him talk about it, but he is in charge of this company. And why are so many people across the world, 3 million as of today, scanning their retina in exchange for a cryptocurrency, a currency that was made out of thin air less than 3 years ago? What are the privacy risks? Why has it already been banned in some countries? And how exactly is it going to prove that you and I are just individuals who each deserve only one share of this future kind of dividend universal basic income that comes from AI? And even if the iris scan is a successful way to make sure that nobody gets 2 shares and we have true proof of personhood, as it's called, how can we be sure that future wealth creating AI, like the one Sam's building at OpenAI, his other company by the way, will even be willing to or want to share all of that with us? Oh yeah, and along the way I'm going to point out a few ways that this project could go horribly wrong for all of us and still make Sam Altman the richest person that the world has ever seen. Way richer than Elon Musk. All right, so let's just start with what even is Sam Altman's vision for WorldCoin. So you have to paint a picture in the maybe near, maybe far future where artificial intelligence is just superhuman, and you can spin up Einstein-level brains and they can go out on the internet, build things, build apps, build games, build social networks, like drones can do food delivery. AI embodied in the real world handles everything pretty much that humans do. There's no jobs left. So at that point, artificial intelligence is behind all of our science, all of our entertainment, all of our inventions, right? And then he envisions at that point, we might really need to think about it in a completely different economic system. We can't just say, oh yeah, good old capitalism and companies and governments running the way they are now are going to keep everybody employed and happy and the economy stable. But lucky for us, this WorldCoin vision of the future also has some sense that all of that wealth wants to be distributed back to the rest of the world. Maybe it's more of an oligarchy that says, hey, look, we need to stop the people from rioting, or maybe it's truly an altruistic AI that says, I just want to do what's right for humans, like I'm aligned with them, and I need to distribute this wealth evenly. And that is where the WorldCoin blockchain-based cryptocurrency starts to enter the picture. So WorldCoin is, like Bitcoin or Ethereum, a world currency, something that can be transferred across borders. Individuals can sign up and get and receive payments. But of course, building that out is just a technical thing. Having the coins be valuable is a different problem. Now, you can argue all day about where the value of anything comes from, even government-backed fiat currencies, but especially with cryptocurrencies, it's a tricky game to play. Like, you need a large swath of people to buy into it in the sense that it has value, to buy into it so much that they're willing to trade other forms of value, like the US dollar, for one of these cryptocurrencies in the expectation that it will hold that value and probably even increase. That's why the crypto markets, especially not the big ones, the little ones, the meme coins, can just go up and down all the time. In some cases, it's primarily narrative driven, but there are many aspects of it that seem more financially sound, you could say, that you can also look at, like scarcity, how many of the coins there are total, the exchange velocity, how many times people are trading them back and forth, the real world use cases, can you use them on places like eBay or Amazon, ease of use, how the app functions, and basically all sorts of other kind of economic things. So one of the tricky things that Sam Altman and the WorldCoin Foundation have to do is kind of make sure that there's at least money there to buy if somebody wants to sell, just to make sure that at this early stage, people find enough value in it that they can actually take their iris, scan it into one of these orbs, give it to the company, and get a cryptocurrency for it, which is of some sort of value, something they can actually sell for food. And it's a lot more expensive to do that in first world countries. So if you go somewhere where $50 is actually a lot of money and buys you a lot of food and you're in a very desperate situation, you can get a lot more out of the people for a lot less. hence might be part of the story and why WorldCoin maybe isn't something you're super familiar with if you're in the United States or the EU, but is something you might be familiar with if you're in South Africa, right? And I would argue that in a roundabout way, the foundation, which raised $250 million and has given a good portion of the coins to the WorldCoin Foundation and to some unknown investors, and Sam, we'll talk about that in a little bit, they kind of need to be there to buy if there isn't enough buying pressure naturally out in the ecosystem. So in a way, they're spending the $250 million plus that they've raised so far to kind of buy, to trade data, iris data, for them to take this currency and think of it as a real thing. And when you're doing that, the last thing you want is somebody double dipping. Like, you don't need an exploit, some really smart people in South Africa that are like, you know how I can keep like scanning my eye over and over again and it's like a slight variation every time and just collect this money over and over again and not really contribute to the ecosystem? And at the same time, if you actually are trying to make a universal basic income, you don't want the same problem, right? If it comes to essentially government handouts or some sort of future AI overworld government handout, then you also don't want people taking 2 or 3 or more shares. So WorldCoin found themselves in a position where they had to solve this problem. This is where proof of personhood comes in. This is where you would think the blockchain would be the main way to like control iris scans, but it's not. We'll talk about that in a second too. This is the WorldCoin iris scanning orb. Yeah, definitely they kind of went like straight at like, how do you make this look like the most dystopian kind of thing you can? I mean, look, to be frank, when I'm looking at my iPhone or you're looking at your Android phone and you're unlocking with your face, probably a good chance they're looking at some of your iris data too, or at least the combination of your face and your eyes and all of that together for a unique fingerprint. So I don't want to say like the iris scan itself is necessarily like something we couldn't imagine from a big company or it's like super, super duper dystopian, but the orb is worth talking about, and especially where the data goes and why we don't have control over the software. So the orb is a piece of hardware that is manufactured by the WorldCoin Foundation. And when you hold it up to your eye, it scans your eyeball because your eyeball is like your fingerprint. It's a unique pattern that can identify you and only you. And if you can attach a unique identifier like that to a single address for the cryptocurrency to drop into, you should be able to make it so that if somebody puts their other eye up or their same eye again and they try to get a second share, it says, oh, I've seen this eye before. I already know the wallet it's attached to. You can't have 2 shares of universal basic income. So this orb has been built. This orb is being incentivized by people. So if you can get your friends to sign up for it, you get a little bit of money and they get a little bit of money. So once word gets out and these orbs get distributed to people who sign up through the website to be distributors, that's a job that maybe somebody, especially in a third world or a poor area, would love to have. And all they got to do is sign up all their friends to scan themselves, and each time they're getting a equivalent of $5 or whatever USD in WorldCoin. The numbers can rack up, and it seems like they vary the amount of money that you actually get when you scan, but it can be anywhere from like $30 to $50, it seems like, for the scan, maybe somewhere between $3 and $5 for the orb operator, and that's the person who's getting paid to go give it to other people. And the other interesting thing about this is once you do receive your $50 in WorldCoin, you now know WorldCoin exists, and then you probably need to use the app on your phone to sell it so you can have $50 in actual like milk and eggs and food. So you're familiar with it as an interchangeable currency, which starts to give credence to it. So the 3 million people who have scanned their eyes and have wallets have probably, they're either holding on to the money they got, or they've maybe given it to someone else or traded it or exchanged it. So they kind of know how it works. And now the ecosystem's growing. This is increasing the velocity of the money, how much it's traded, which in theory is the more velocity goes up, the more the value can go up too. So hopefully these coins are also worth more as time goes on. It's more in demand, more people need it and want it and need to trade it. So it's starting to move up in value relative to the other currencies, which should be good in theory, because if the people who are the poorest in the world are the first to sign up and their world coins go from maybe what they are trading at today, which is like $5 or $6, up to maybe $50,000 or something, $70,000 like Bitcoin has, those people can really maybe be pulled out of poverty. But who knows? See, I mean, like only Bitcoin, a little bit of Ethereum, and a few others have ever done something like that. So definitely, this is not financial advice. Do not buy it unless you think it's going to go up in value, which I'm not recommending. But it could, and there's a bunch of really rich people in Silicon Valley who are planning on that. But just keep in mind, when it does go up, it'll be super disproportionate to the investors. The same ones who seem really keen on not sharing their identity in the same way that they're asking of the 3 million people who scanned their iris for $50 worth of it. Sorry, my cynicism is showing again. I'm gonna buckle it up. Back to the facts. Let's go through a brief history of WorldCoin. So jumping back to late 2018, Sam Altman and a couple friends got together and said, you know what problem needs to be solved? We need to help humanity adjust to the effects of AI, primarily wealth concentration. So in 2019, WorldCoin was formed. Now, it didn't have that name at first. It was originally called Tools for Humanity. And at this point, there's 3 founders. Sam Altman, famous from OpenAI and ChatGPT and all of that stuff. And then 2 other guys, Max Novenstern and Alex Blana. Sam's always been the chairman of the company and he signs off on what the CEO is doing. So at first, Max was the CEO, but in 2021 that switched and now Alex is the CEO. And during that time, from like the 2019 up to the 2021, this project operated completely in secret. It was in stealth mode, as they say in Silicon Valley, and it was focused on developing the core technology. Mainly the iris scanning orb to scan people's retinas, the way to like transfer that into their servers, the way to build the WorldCoin database up, kind of copy and paste some of this cryptocurrency stuff so they could have their own crypto. Then in October of 2021, WorldCoin is publicly announced. It raises $25 million in an initial round of funding led by Andreessen Horowitz, the A16Z investor that like probably everyone knows by now. But it's worth noting that this wasn't a planned 2021 announcement. They were exposed by a Bloomberg reporter who actually broke the story, and then they came clean and like, yeah, here's the company, here's what we've raised from A16Z, and here's what we're doing. Now there's a bunch of other investors in this. Now it's sort of impossible. I like try to do some research and I can't figure out exactly who they are or how much they've raised, but I have some estimates. So let me run through this really quick just to give you some sense of kind of where these assumptions came from. So we assume that there's 20,000 orbs that exist today. Manufacturing the cost is like a complete unknown, but let's say they cost $1,000 each to produce. We can use Glassdoor for a hint on WorldCoin's team size, and it appears that they have at least 100 to 200 employees. Like these are pretty technical people, so if we assume that they're making $150,000 a year as a ballpark, 150 employees, $150,000 each means $22 million per year in payroll, right? The company's 4 years old. Let's say they're spending like $42 million or so per year. Like that's probably getting into the 150 millions overall at least. And like that ignores all the other costs, development, legal, marketing, travel, office space, etc. So I could be way off, but there are some firms that have publicly announced that they are investors. So you can find references to Bain Capital, Distributed Global, Khosla Ventures, Coinbase Ventures, and then of course Sam Altman personally. So now October 2021, they're out of stealth mode. The WorldCoin Foundation incorporates for the first time in the Cayman Islands. So technically there's no owner of the company. There are just 3 board members, Alex, Sam, and Max. So there's an app you can download to your phone to actually hold the coins. That's a crypto wallet and it's called World ID. And World ID is tied to your iris scan. Now in 2022, the WorldCoin orbs started getting out there in select locations. And these orb operators all around the world started getting their share of these WLD tokens for signing up their friends essentially. Once this kind of started catching on, by the end of 2022, there were a lot of places that were like, whoa, this is too invasive. So some countries were done with them and they said, you got to leave until you can handle the regulatory concerns better. And they banned some biometric data collection altogether where WorldCoin just couldn't operate. But there's plenty of places where they still operate, and that's how they got to the 3 million people that we're at today. But by the end of 2023, they exited what they called their beta stage and they started getting into a whole bunch of different countries. At the same time, the WLD token, which people originally couldn't trade, became tradable. Now it's still not tradable in the US, but it is in many other countries right now. Okay, so now let's take a second to talk about how this whole system works, because it's pretty strange and fascinating when you actually see what's happening. All right, so when you put your eye into this thing, it's just a camera, but it's a camera that can see a little bit of the ultraviolet and infrared and everything in between. So it's just like taking a photo on your phone, but super high resolution and super high spectrum. Now the photo that's on the orb doesn't actually get sent anywhere. It's never directly stored on any servers, which is a good thing. It's ran through a hash function. So it's immediately taken, compressed through a one-way function, and then destroyed. So what that would be like if you store passwords for somebody's website, you don't actually store people's passwords on a server that can be read, you hash them up. So they make this crazy complex unique thing that can be checked to make sure they have the right password they're entering without knowing what the password is directly, or if that hash got out onto the internet, somebody couldn't reverse it and figure out what the actual password is. So the image is turned into this unique and unreversible piece of code, the hash. But that hash is just stored in a straight up centralized database that's owned by WorldCoin. For all this crypto stuff, you might think, oh, is it stored in the cryptocurrency on the blockchain, like somehow where it could be never manipulated again? And the answer is no. It's just sent to a server that these guys have control over. So people at the WorldCoin Foundation with the proper permissions can log into this database, search it, export it, change it, whatever. Now what the database is really used for though is verification. So if that same person is like, oh, I saw another orb operator last week, I should do it for a second time and get a second share. When they go to the orb, scan the eye, it will hash that eye image down into the same hash, and then it will double check against the server if it already exists. And if a match is found, it's gonna prevent the user from signing up for a second wallet. But we're also gonna have some conversations between open source and closed source. Now the plans to make the orb are pretty detailed and open source. So the exact hardware that the camera is using, the exact way the orb is constructed, the same hardware could be created by many other companies. That's not something WorldCoin has kept to themselves. However, just because anybody can build the devices does not mean everybody has open source control over the software that's actually doing the hash function, that's talking to the server. That is not been open sourced. So you gotta consider that's not an open source system. We don't know if there's any bugs. We don't know if there's any privacy concerns. It's not like you can just go to GitHub and download that and check it yourself. It's not like Linux or true open source software. And when it comes to decentralization, it is centralized. Now, before researching this video, I kind of assumed that was the whole point. I thought you would scan the iris, and in the same way that you can actually add information to a block, like on the Bitcoin blockchain, the iris hash or somehow it would be tied into your private or public key in some way, but that's not what's happening. Because along with who owns what Bitcoin, you can usually throw in some extra data. And fun fact on that, and it was actually a link to a Times article about bank bailouts. So that's always kind of like this cool historical thing in the Bitcoin world, but a little bit of a side tangent. But I thought if you can do links like that into the blocks, you might be taking the actual hashes and putting them in there too, but that's not how this works. So there's some pros and cons to this system, so I don't want to just kind of demonize it right away. Not everything that's decentralized is better, especially because if all this iris data, even in hashed form, was publicly available, because everything on the blockchain is, then it does seem like a lot of people could go out there, sort of reverse engineer things. If they actually were able to link your eye to, say, your wallet, there might be ways that that same hash could be used for other things. So it's not great having it out there publicly, and maybe in some ways it is better behind a private server. However, the people at WorldCoin do have control over this database, so they could delete entries, they could manipulate entries, they could sell that data for some sort of profitable reason, and we would never know. And you might be thinking, well, okay, so the iris data isn't decentralized, but maybe the cryptocurrency itself is decentralized. After all, Bitcoin and Ethereum are decentralized. Are WLD tokens, which are very similar, also decentralized? And that answer is no, they're not. So thanks to some great investigative work done by the Coin Bureau, I found out that WLD tokens have a multi-signature wallet that can override the entire system. So to be clear, that means there is some group of people that all have private keys, and if they all use them at the same time, because as a group they decide they need to override the system, they can do anything they want with anybody else's money. Take money from one, put it in another, distribute more money to this one, not to this one, whatever they want. Confiscation, realignment, like buddy hookups. Now, from a system point of view, that makes it much closer to the SWIFT system that's behind the US banking system, where there are people who have control over that. If the IRS or the government wanted to shut down your bank account, they could. If they could lock you out of it, they could withdraw money, they can do all sorts of stuff without your control. But a real decentralized cryptocurrency, like Bitcoin, has to be forked. The entire network has to split, because the one true source is the one true source. But here's the other wild thing, is that's not even the only place they have centralized control. Remember I said that it was a layer 2 solution that sits on top of Ethereum? Right, and they do that for speed and convenience. So even though Ethereum might take a little while to reconcile, if you have a layer 2 above it, it can have a bunch of quick transactions and then just dump them all into one. So there's like this slow moving train underneath that has all of this space, and then there's all these quick moving trains up above, and they kind of fit into one of those compartments as it moves along. Now for this layer 2 solution, WorldCoin originally used something called Polygon. But around 2022, they actually switched over to a different layer 2 solution. And And guess what? There's even a group of people on that can override stuff that happens. So there's another centralized point of control. Now it's interesting because this layer 2 solution is actually meant to prioritize verified humans over AI bots and trading algorithms. That's the whole point of this scan. Think of the airport pre-check where you get to prove that you're human ahead of time, and then that saves you time every time you go through the airport. WorldCoin's layer 2 is similar to that. It keeps spam and AI stuff that's happening at lightning speed below the speed of humans so that we can actually have priority. Users who authenticate themselves via the WorldCoin's retina scanning orb device will get special treatment. And that's always been WorldCoin's perennial pitch for networks. Quote, verified humans, an ecosystem designed to filter out bots in the increasingly uncanny age of artificial intelligence. And if you really think about it, even though the government does have control over the SWIFT system for the most part, it itself is much more decentralized and less controlling than these two groups of central points, like the small amount of people at the WorldCoin Foundation and the investors, and the small amount of people who run the Optimism layer 2 solution. Like, it's much more tightly controlled, and that's where this kind of idea of these oligarchs or these few super powerful people might be if this really does become like a worldwide UBI system. Any other publicly traded company, like a Robinhood or a PayPal, like they can go in there and have some control. It's certainly a company. PayPal controls their rails. They know who signed up for their account. But still, they would be accountable to a government. I don't even know if Sam Altman in the Cayman Islands could even, what kind of jurisdiction could even go after them? Like, it's very weird. Let's go back to the privacy risks for a minute. Recently, WorldCoin has been banned in Portugal, Spain, and Kenya. So let's look at why. Now, in Portugal, data authorities temporarily suspended WorldCoin, citing concerns over data protection for minors with the iris scanning platform. Okay, so they did it based on the fact that some minors are getting their irises scanned in here and they're too young to make these decisions. Not to mention, like, if you just want to guess at how many of the 3 million people actually understood the true system of WorldCoin that they were scanning their eyes into, I bet it was like way less than 1%. I mean, I learned a ton just making this video, but like, who does that or watches these kind of videos? Like, not the average person who needs $50 for their eye. Sorry, cynical tangent again, I'm back. Spain has banned WorldCoin for up to 3 months due to the perceived privacy risks from the venture. Kenya was the first country to suspend WorldCoin, with the government halting all local activity associated with the platform, including the biometric identification. And what they're arguing is that even though you've hashed the image, there's still privacy risks. Is there a third party that's actually checking this database to make sure that you are storing everything the way that you say it is and that it's not being used in any bad ways? Have you been clear about any kind of policy for deletion? Like, what if somebody says, hey, like, I signed up for this, I'll give you the money back, but take my iris off this system. Like, can you prove that you've done that? What about the potential for surveillance? How do we know that nobody from any other country, US, China, the Cayman Islands, is like in there checking out what people are doing with their money? The other weird thing is that even though people think of sometimes Bitcoin and some cryptocurrencies as like privacy coins, once you've actually linked your identification to a wallet and somebody else knows that, you have this crystal clear data trail of where all the money you've ever spent went and all the ones that you've ever got came from. I mean, it's all traceable. And if somebody knows you have a certain amount of money, that makes you at risk. Oh, another thing I should have mentioned earlier, I forgot, was that when you actually get this money, it's not like you just get a deposit of, say, the equivalent of $50 in WLD tokens. You also get some of it right away, and some of it keeps like coming into your wallet for a while to keep you logging in and using it. So it's like, it's good, I guess, for building the ecosystem, but it's very gamified, like feels slightly manipulative to me. Cynicism, Dylan. Cynicism. Forget the cynicism, let's just go full in. Let's talk about some of the ways why this project might not be aligned well with the actual people it's supposed to serve. First off, there's a certain amount of hubris to think that you can just take this kind of data from people and offer them so little and think that it's for their own good. In my opinion, but I also understand that we could use a worldwide proof of personhood system, so maybe that's something that has to happen. But the way it was built, WorldCoin's success from an investor point of view means getting a ton of people to think that this currency has value, which just feels like a slightly unnecessary thing for just building a system for UBI. Because it puts the incentive in building out the ecosystem above making sure that the privacy risks and the reasonable benefits are out there first. I mean, there's just this information gap. Like the fact that they were in stealth mode for so long, the fact that like you don't really see Sam Altman trying to explain and talk about and build systems of transparency around it in the same way kind of seems like he's trying to do with OpenAI. Well, even with OpenAI, it's not even like, it's not a publicly open model. It's notoriously secretive with all their stuff. So yeah, I mean, it just doesn't feel like we have the kind of transparency that might be healthy. The value of the WLD token is pretty speculative. I don't know if it's the best thing to not have a stable currency that you're paying these people in, because I guess that would be good if it goes through the roof, but the variability about it makes it kind of stressful for these people. If they have $50 and then $70 and then $30, and that means a lot to them because they need food, it's just a stressful way to pay them. Like, it incentivizes these people to get money right away, but not so much to think in the long term about what it might mean if their iris data is out there. And you know, some really great hacking teams are targeting that database. It is definitely in the interest of other nation states to get a hold of it. And of course, they claim they have strong security measures, but if not, what are you going to do? Take the company down in the Cayman Islands, or take the cryptocurrency, the WD tokens, back from the investors? Like, they'll still be out there tradable. It won't really, in the worst case scenario, all these people get their data exposed, but all of the people who built the system still stay rich. I believe AGI is happening in our lifetime. I think ASI is happening in our lifetime. I think there will be tremendous wealth that becomes concentrated. But as long as the AIs are distributed by companies like Microsoft and Meta and Google, or by governments like the US, China, India, etc., or even individual entrepreneurs that are using AI agents to go out there and figure out ways for them to become rich, I don't see any of them that incentivized to take all that concentrated wealth and be like, oh, why don't we distribute this evenly with the rest of the world? I mean, one can hope, but that's really not how people work. So if there was this big entity, like something like the UN, but it was kind of over most of the world, and they wanted to create a system to distribute wealth that was probably taxed in some ways from all the countries proportionally, they wouldn't go use WorldCoin. They would probably maybe learn from what they did and roll out their own solution. But this would take something along the line of a World Bank or some, UN organization or something too. And if we really follow this thing out to its logical end, and we assume that there is like an ASI, like something that is smarter than all humans on Earth combined, and it's the new sort of leader of the world, and it's trying to keep us alive and keep us happy because there's nothing left for humans to do because we're all so stupid and we're all like pets to it, then it's also not going to need this. It's going to have no problem using pattern recognition to figure out who all the people on Earth are that are alive and what one share looks like and how to distribute it to them. It's not going to be like, oh, I'm super smart, but without like blockchain rails and iris scans, how will I know how people don't get two portions? It's like, at that point, like, all bets are off anyways. Look, I can't really know what Sam and Max and Alex really intended when they started the company. I can't really say what the individuals that work there truly think about the mission and like what they're saying internally. But from an outsider perspective, the argument that we need proof of personhood is an interesting problem to solve. That might be some benefits of it. But at any point in the future where there's some substantial like superhuman AI or some sort of government organization that really does want to give money to everyone in the world equally, I don't feel like this is how they're going to do it. Here in the tokenomics is where I kind of start to come to my most pessimistic view of the project. So there's a planned cap of 10 billion WorldCoin. So imagine if only $10 billion were ever created, the value of a dollar would go up through the roof, right? There's a plan to never get more than 10 billion WorldCoins out into the open. Like, there will never be any that are made. So you might be shocked to know that only 8 of those 10 billion are actually planning to go to the rest of us, to all of the regular people who are scanning in their irises and getting their fee and getting access to the coins. So where's the other 20% of this entire future economy? Well, 10% of it is with the investors and 10% of it is with the WorldCoin Foundation. So put this in perspective, let's assume Elon Musk gets up to $200 billion in net worth. That would be about 2% of the entire $20 trillion M2 money supply in the US. As unfair as that sounds, that's clearly better than having people stay in poverty. So I'm not saying they're doing anything like super nefarious, super intentional, but there is a lot of consequences to something like this just happening, and that's what I want to open up the conversation with you today. Ethereum co-founder Vitalik Buterin shared a blog post basically impressed with WorldCoin's ambitious use of iris scanning to tackle the, quote, unique human problem, but he also had a bunch of privacy concerns. Summarizing his position, there's a bunch of reasons that this might need to be a broader effort. He's concerned about the whole system getting too centralized, especially, he notes, because of the hardware reliance and the government compliance. He definitely had similar concerns about a system like this becoming too centralized, and of course, if it's too centralized, that's the same problem we're having with the centralization of all the money. I think WorldCoin is bold. I think it's ambitious. I think it's interesting. I think it's a problem worth solving. But I also think it's a textbook example of techno-solutionism. The technology won't fix a social problem. Like, we need education, poverty, lack of access to banking, the economic inequality that we're trying to solve with something like UBI is a multifaceted problem. And it's just one of those problems that if you really wanted to tackle this right, you'd probably put a lot more effort into incentivizing all of the right people in the right power positions to get on board with it along the way. I just feel like any one of these solutions that would truly be for the betterment of the world would be just so transparent, and it would be taking all of this money to get the word out, get all these people on board, to try to like sort out and negotiate what it is that each country really wants from a system like this, how in the long run we can unify people, how we can sort of offset people who are going to get obscenely wealthy, or to stop the first world countries from having too much control, to keep government out of the system. Like, there's just such a bigger conversation that he should be having, and he's actually in a powerful enough position to maybe do some of that too. So that should be on the table. There should at least be talking points that he would be like welcoming, like, hey, this is crazy stuff right now, and I've got these orbs out here, but I'm always open to like incentivizing people in other ways. I'm open to opening the books to different groups. And I think very quickly those investors should be paid back. Even at this point, I don't know what they probably bought their tokens at like 10 cents or something. It's trading today at $5. It was like $7, even $9 last week. Pay those people back, give them like 10, 15, 20x like their investment, but get all the investors out of it. Maybe even the WorldCoin Foundation itself needs a good plan to like get rid of all those coins so that the economy becomes an economy for everyone. And you know it's got to be tempting for a company that has that kind of data to be like, oh, somebody would offer me an insane amount of money to get access to all of these retina scans to know where money is flowing throughout the world. Like, they're either going to get hacked or they're going to succumb to the carrot or the stick, some threats from a government or some government that's willing to give them a bunch of money in the Cayman Islands and make them all ungodly rich. But just like with artificial intelligence as a whole, this is a difficult problem. It's going to be really hard to move into the future without compromising fundamental human rights, but we're going to have to work really hard to keep them, and it's going to be a better world if we do. Thanks for watching Dylan Curious. Smash subscribe. See you guys in the next video.